which makes us the illusion of science, because as you know, science requires replication, debate, continued evaluation, and which I have to question whether psychiatry is a viable and trustworthy medical specialty given the clear misrepresentation of scientific data by key academic opinion leaders who are hired by the pharmaceutical industry, and they shape medical training and public perception to such the extent it almost seems to, appears more of a religion than anything that medical students have to blindly follow, that you see when you want to enter into some critical analysis, when you want to present your work, for example, there's a defensiveness that occurs where they're so closed off and not even open to the possibility that that the drug's efficacy and safety is completely misrepresented to them.
Yeah. When you talk about the difficulty of getting critical views published, so our riot reanalysis of paroxetine, the infamous study 329, which was eventually published in the BMJ, that process of from submission to publication took a year. Rather than the standard page or two of reviews, there were 27 pages of peer review that we had to deal with. So the bar that's set for critical discourse in psychiatry is so much higher than what's required to put the bad science out there in the first place. And, as a critic, if you make one mistake, you're disqualified. Yeah. As the person putting out the bad ideas in the first place can be riddled with errors, and you have an opportunity to correct them. So it's a very uneven battle.
And the way that it's represented, it's if you do have critical analysis and you really do believe in the scientific process, and that's a high ethical standard, you're deemed anti-psychiatry for questioning any of the evidence. I mean, it feels very, very similar to how other people are discredited when they have opposing views to what is the majority. It's you become kind of discredited as a person, and not your critical analysis or your findings or anything around your opinions or beliefs that you want to share aren't really argued. It's just this ad hominem attack.
Yeah. I went to a conference on truth decay. It was about, my kind of stuff about misrepresentation. But it was interesting because one of the presenters was talking about conspiracy theories. And one of his conspiracy theories that he put up for discussion was that antidepressants are ineffective and dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful machine. And I do see that that there's movement. Certainly, post-COVID, there's certainly a distrust in the public authority, the medical authority, which is valuable because it's leading people to advocate and question and take control of their own health. That's kind of the positive of all this. Obviously, there's always downsides too when the trust in public institutions becomes less credible. And I think we're going through that challenging and difficult time. My question to you is, how do we restore trust back into the scientific process? I mean, what can be done in our culture and at the federal level to ensure scientific integrity?
I think it can only come about through government intervention, which is not likely. But I mean, I think the public pay for all of the research that pharmaceutical companies carry out. So the argument that only the pharmaceutical industry can afford to do this research is spurious, because we subsidise them to do the research, whether it's in Australia through government prescription scheme or in countries where individuals pay for their medication. So you're paying not only for the science, but you're paying much more for the marketing that the company does. So it could be taken away completely from the pharmaceutical industry, and all drug research, only drug research that's carried out by independent authorities would be counted for licensing of drugs. A less ambitious approach would be to eliminate to largely eliminate journals from the process. That what would be required of people who carried out research would be to publish their data, maybe not available to the whole public, but available to suitably qualified people. And then anybody could make their analysis of what the data shows them, and that would be what's published in journals and so on. That the government employ health technology agencies to properly analyse data. But conflict of interest will find its way into all these areas. If you look at you've talked about guidelines. I mean, guidelines are almost always conflicted, and the view is that the experts inevitably have entanglement with industry, because industry is after the best people, and the best people attract industry sponsorship. So if you exclude people with industry sponsorship, then you're not going to have the best people making the decisions. I mean, that's a spurious argument. You mentioned before about doctors being hired by industry. We're not mostly hired. And in fact, when we are hired, that's not so bad. If I'm employed by a company, then there's a clear contract. Excuse me, it's overt that I'm working in the interests of the company. Much more problematic is the creation of key opinion leaders, who are people who honestly believe that they're independent and probably think they're taking the drug company for a ride. Look at these people. They're giving me all this money to do stuff. I don't even always prescribe their drug. I'm much smarter than they are. I mean, the drug companies are really good at playing into our arrogance as doctors. We think we're the cleverest in the pack. And they've got these huge billion-dollar marketing companies made up of people who are really very clever, and they're outwitting us every step of the way. There's no such thing as an equal partnership between somebody who's very rich and somebody who's got modest means, so that you can have an ethical relationship in which you're employed by somebody very rich, but you can't have an ethical relationship in which you are subjected to the illusion that you're in a partnership with somebody very rich, because they're pulling all the strings, and whether you know it or not, you're a puppet.